I stood before the large mirror, adjusting my tie, checking every crease on my dress shirt. Today was an important day. The annual meeting of Carter & Coney. The wine and agricultural real estate conglomerate my family had built over 3 generations. The air this morning felt different, like a cold breeze passing through despite the radiant sun outside. I told myself it was probably just baseless anxiety. My father, Richard Carter, had called me in early saying there would be a significant announcement. I assumed it was about the plan to expand into the European market, a project I had poured my heart into for the past 3 years. But deep down, an unnamed premonition made my heart beat faster than usual. The grand boardroom at Carter & Company's headquarters was on the top floor with massive glass windows overlooking Sonoma Valley, where endless vineyards stretched into the distance. The polished walnut conference table, luxurious leather chairs, and light from the crystal chandelier gave the room an air of authority. I walked in smiling at the shareholders already seated. They responded with polite nods, but I noticed a few averted gazes. Something was off. I pulled out my chair and sat in my familiar spot right beside my father, where I had sat for the past 12 years as the chief operating officer. My father, Richard Carter, entered with his usual commanding presence, his silver hair neatly combed, his navy suit perfectly tailored. Following him was Claudia, my stepmother, in a form-fitting wine-red dress, her smile sharp. Beside her was Logan, her son from a previous marriage, my stepbrother. Logan always had a way of making me uneasy, from his smirking half-smile to the way he tilted his head as if challenging everyone around him. "Good morning, everyone." My father began, his voice steady and resonant, cutting through the murmurs in the room.
"Thank you all for being here today. This is a special day not only for Carter & Co., but for our family as well." I smiled, nodding slightly. Special. The word made me think of great victories like when we secured a contract with a 5-star hotel chain in New York, or when I convinced an Italian partner to import our wines. I had worked tirelessly for 12 years to pull the company back from the brink of bankruptcy to its leading position in Sonoma Valley. I looked at my father, expecting him to mention the European project, or perhaps offer a rare word of praise for me. But then, he continued, each sentence hitting like an unexpected blow. "Today, I want to announce a significant decision. After many years of dedication, I have decided to retire early. It is time for the next generation to take over, bringing a modern vision to Carter & Coney." The room fell silent. I felt time itself freeze. Early retirement. My father was only 61, still full of energy, still gracing the covers of business magazines as a symbol of resilience. I stared at him, searching for a sign that this was a joke, but his eyes avoided mine, shifting toward Logan. "And I am proud to announce," he continued, his voice rising slightly, "that Logan, my son, will assume the role of Chief Operating Officer starting next month." The world seemed to collapse beneath my feet. Logan is CEO. Logan, who had never worked a serious day in his life. Logan, who only knew how to spend money on expensive cars and all-night parties. I turned to look at him. Logan was smiling a smug, self-satisfied grin, as if he had known this was coming all along. Claudia clapped first, her pale hands striking together like a triumphant symphony. The other shareholders joined in sporadically, but I could see the awkwardness on their faces. "Ethan." My father called my name, his tone softer, but laced with unease. "You will transition to the role of strategic advisor, supporting Logan during this transition period." Strategic advisor. Those 4 words echoed in my mind like a sentence. Not co-director, not vice president, but advisor. A position with no power, no prestige. My breathing grew heavy, as if the air in the room had suddenly thickened. I looked at my father, hoping he would say something, anything, to explain why he was doing this. But he looked at Logan and smiled with proud eyes. Claudia spoke up, her voice smooth as velvet but sharp as shattered glass. "I believe this is the right decision for the future of Carter & Coney."
Logan brings freshness and flexibility that the company needs to reach further. I stood, my legs trembling, but I forced myself to stay steady. All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "Congratulations, Logan," I said, looking straight into his eyes. But in my gaze I knew he saw something. Not congratulations, but disappointment, the smoldering fire burning in my chest. "Thank you, Ethan," Logan replied, his voice smooth and condescending. "You have always been a great example to learn from. I look forward to working with you in your new role." New role. His words were another stab. I wanted to shout, to slam my hand on the table and ask my father why. Why had he betrayed his promise 12 years ago in this very room he had told me I would be his successor, that I was the future of Carter & Co. But now, it was all a lie. I turned to my father, my voice low, trembling slightly. "Are you sure about this decision, Father?" He looked up, but his eyes avoided mine, gazing somewhere over my shoulder. "Ethan, everything is for the company's growth and for the family." Family. The word made me want to laugh, but my throat tightened. Family. The family he meant was Claudia and Logan, not me. I felt my heart being squeezed, but I would not let myself appear weak. "Not here, not in front of them." "Yes, Father," I said, my voice flat. "I understand." I turned and walked out of the boardroom. I heard the murmurs behind me, the whispers of the shareholders, but no one dared speak up. They knew what had just happened. They knew I had just been stripped of everything. My office was at the end of the hallway where I had spent thousands of hours working, dreaming. I pushed the door open and slammed it shut behind me. The familiar space, my oak desk bookshelves filled with documents and the nameplate reading Ethan Carter, Executive Director, neatly placed on the desk. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the engraved gold lettering. 12 years. 12 years I had lived for this nameplate, this name, this legacy. I removed the nameplate and placed it in a drawer. The sound of metal against wood was sharp like a farewell. I walked to the window and looked out. The Carter & Company logo glowed brightly on the building, a symbol of success. But now it only made me feel empty. 12 years of effort. 12 years of sacrifice, all pushed aside in a matter of minutes. In my mind, a single thought repeated like a mournful song that would not stop. What did I do wrong? I had no answer. But I knew one thing. This was not the end. Not for me. I sat down in the chair, the familiar leather seat from my earliest days back in Sonoma Valley. At 34, I felt as though I had already lived an entire lifetime. 12 years ago, I stood at a crossroads. A job offer from a major corporation in New York with a salary that would have ensured a comfortable life, or a call from my father to return and save Carter & Co., our family business teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. I chose family not for money, not for fame, but for honor. The honor of the Carter name of my grandfather, Henry Carter, who planted the first grapevines on this land. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out an old framed photo. It was a picture of me and my father taken 12 years ago when I had just graduated with my MBA. In the photo, he was smiling, his hand resting on my shoulder, his eyes brimming with pride. "You are the future of Carter & Company. Ethan," he had said right here in this room. I believed him, but now looking back, I saw only my own naivety. For the past 12 years, I had worked over 14 hours a day leading major projects, from building a new winery to securing contracts with major hotel chains. I remembered those early months when the company was drowning in debt. I flew back and forth between California and New York, convincing investors and banks to believe that Carter & Company was still worth saving. And we did it. From a failing business, I brought it to record profits, transforming the Carter name into a symbol of premium wine in Sonoma Valley. I stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the vineyard stretching under the glow of the sunset. Sonoma Valley, where I was born and raised, where I once thought I would call home forever. But now I felt like a stranger in my own house. My father, Richard Carter, was the one who pushed me out of its center. At 61, he still maintained the polished veneer of a corporate chairman. But I knew better than anyone. He was not a leader. He preferred wine-soaked galas to strategy meetings, flattery to hard numbers. Claudia. My stepmother was a different story. She entered my father's life like a storm with her glamorous appearance and the sharp cunning of someone who had once been a PR director for a major brand. At 55, she still exuded the charm of high society. But I always sensed a coldness in her eyes. Claudia never openly opposed me, but I knew she had manipulated my father, subtly planting the idea in his mind that I was too rigid, that I lacked the flexibility to lead. I tried to ignore it, believing that as long as I did my job well, I would prove my worth. But I was wrong. And then there was Logan, my stepbrother Claudia's son from a previous marriage. Only a year younger than me. We were worlds apart. Logan grew up spoiled by our father, living extravagantly, always showing off. His education was mediocre, and he never worked seriously at the company until Claudia pushed our father to bring him onto the board. I still remembered the times Logan would pat my shoulder, calling me Big Brother with a friendly smile. But I saw the envy in his eyes, the jealousy of what I had achieved. I tried to see him as family, but now, after today's meeting, I realized he had never seen me as a brother. I sat back down, my hands cradling my head, trying to piece together the fragments of my thoughts. 12 years I had sacrificed everything. I missed birthdays, vacations, chances to live a normal life. I worked myself to exhaustion, falling asleep at my desk, waking up to cold cups of coffee. I saved the company, pulling it from the brink to build an empire. But all I got in return was a strategic advisor role and a declaration that Logan, who had never shed a drop of sweat for the company, was the future. 3 months have passed since that fateful meeting, and Carter & Company is no longer the company I once knew. Logan, in his new role as CEO, has turned the place into his personal playground. I still remember the day he strode into the boardroom, dressed in a pristine suit, a smug smile on his lips, declaring he would usher the company into a new era. I tried to stay calm, tried to believe he might do something worthwhile, but now, seeing the changes he has brought, I only see a cascade of mistakes like dominoes toppling one after another. Logan moved fast, recklessly fast. Within weeks, he replaced a slew of directors, loyal to me with younger faces, people he called his modern team. They were his friends from lavish parties, people who had never set foot in a vineyard or understood the value of a bottle of wine crafted with heart and soul. I vividly recall the day James, our veteran production manager who had worked with me for 8 years, walked into my office, his face pale. "Ethan, we have been replaced," he said, his voice trembling with anger and helplessness. Logan says I do not fit his new vision. All I could do was grip his hand and apologize, though I knew deep down he was not at fault. But that feeling of powerlessness, knowing I could not change a thing, was suffocating. Logan did not stop at personnel changes. He poured money into high-risk real estate ventures, luxury resorts in obscure locations. "We need to expand quickly, Ethan," he once said during a meeting, his tone condescending as if I were some outdated relic. "The era of traditional wine is over. We need to chase trends." I tried to warn him, sitting him down with numbers and charts explaining that the real estate market was unstable, that cutting costs on traditional wine production to pivot to industrial lines would destroy our reputation. But every time I spoke up, Logan would just smile, pat my shoulder, and say, "Ethan, you are too conservative. Leave it to me." Or worse, he would turn to his new directors and say, "Let us note Ethan's input for consideration." I knew those words were just a polite way to brush me aside. My father, Richard Carter, hurt me the most. After retiring, he completely withdrew from the company, handing full control to Logan.
He spent his days traveling with Claudia, attending extravagant parties in Paris and Dubai, living the peaceful retirement she spoke of. I tried to reach him. Phone calls, texts, even driving to his sprawling house on the outskirts of Sonoma Valley. But every time I brought up the company's state, he brushed me off. "Logan will handle it, Ethan. Focus on your role." When I pressed that Logan was leading the company to ruin, he merely shrugged and said, "Son, do not be so serious. Logan needs time to learn." I wanted to scream in his face that Logan was not learning, that he was destroying everything I had built. But I stayed silent because his indifferent gaze told me I had been cast out of my own legacy. One late evening, I sat alone in my office, the light from my laptop screen casting shadows on my face. The revenue spreadsheet before me was a sea of red like blood seeping from the company's wounds. I could do nothing. Could not stop Logan. Could not make my father see. I felt like a caged animal roaring but unheard. I looked up at the photo on my desk. A picture of my grandfather, Henry Carter, standing in a vineyard, a radiant smile on his face. He was the one who taught me everything from tending grapevines to upholding honor. "If you were still alive," I whispered, my voice breaking, "you would not recognize this company anymore." The photo of my grandfather brought my grandmother, Margaret Carter, to mind, the only person who still believed in me. She lived alone on the outskirts of Sonoma Valley in a small wooden house nestled among old vineyards. She was the last link to the family's past, to the days when Carter & Co. was not just a company, but a dream, a legacy. I had not visited her since that fateful meeting, too ashamed to face her. Ashamed that I had let their legacy fall into Logan's hands. But tonight, I could not stay here any longer. I needed her, her comfort, a place where I could breathe without feeling suffocated. I stood, shut off my laptop, and grabbed my car keys. As I left the office, I glanced back one last time. This room, once the center of my world, was now just an empty shell. I closed the door and stepped outside. The cold Sonoma Valley night wrapping around me like a harsh embrace. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving behind the glowing Carter & Company logo. Once my pride, now just a painful memory. The road to my grandmother Margaret's house wound through the old vineyards, where the silvery moonlight bathed the rows of vines in a serene, painterly glow. But inside me everything churned like a storm. I slowed the car, letting the scent of earth and grapes drift through the open window, searching for a shred of peace amidst the fragments of my broken spirit. Carter & Co. The company I had poured my youth into building was unraveling under Logan's hands, and my father, the person I once trusted most, had turned his back on me. I felt like a lost soul, no longer sure who I was or what I was fighting for. My grandmother's small wooden house came into view, nestled among the old vineyards where my grandfather, Henry Carter, had planted the family's first grapevines. A warm, golden light spilled from the window, gentle and inviting in stark contrast to the chaos within me. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat still for a moment, staring at the familiar wooden door. How many times as a child had I run through that door, throwing myself into my grandmother's arms, listening to her stories about my grandfather and their love for this land. I was no longer that boy, but I needed her now more than ever. I needed a place to unburden my pain, to find the hope I had lost. I stepped out of the car, my shoes crunching on the gravel path leading to the house. The cool night breeze carried the scent of ripe grapes and decaying wood, stirring memories of childhood. I knocked on the door 3 soft taps and waited. A moment later it opened, and there stood my grandmother Margaret, her small, frail figure slighter than I remembered. She was over 82 now, her white hair neatly pinned up, her gnarled hands trembling as they gripped the doorframe. But her eyes, oh, those eyes still sparkled with the same warmth they held when I was a child, as if nothing in the world could extinguish the fire within her. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft but brimming with love. She gave me a gentle smile,
the kind that made it feel like the world stopped spinning. "Come in, my boy." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. The house was unchanged, the smell of old wood, a faint hint of wine, and family photos lining the walls. A small fireplace crackled, casting light across her face. I noticed how much thinner she had become, her step slow and careful, steadying herself against a chair. My heart tightened. I knew she had been frail for years, reliant on heart medication. But seeing her now, I truly felt the fragility of time. Yet she still tended the small garden behind the house, still crafted her own wine by hand, what she called the last soul of Carter & Co. I wanted to say something to apologize for not visiting more often, but my throat closed up. She led me to the kitchen where a kettle simmered on the stove. "Sit, dear," she said gently. She poured tea into 2 old ceramic mugs and slid one toward me. I held it, the warmth seeping into my palms, but it was not enough to dispel the coldness in my heart. We sat across from each other, silent for a moment. The crackling fire and the soft whistle of the wind outside were the only sounds. I knew she was waiting for me to speak, but I did not know where to begin. How could I tell her that my dreams had shattered, that my grandfather's legacy was being destroyed, that my own family had betrayed me? Finally, I took a deep breath, and the words spilled out like a river breaking through a dam. "Grandma," I began, my voice trembling. "Carter & Co. is not ours anymore. Logan, he is ruining everything. He has changed it all. Staff strategies. He does not care about quality or tradition. Dad handed everything to him and will not listen to me. I have tried, Grandma. I have tried to warn them, but no one listens. I feel pushed out, like the 12 years I gave mean nothing." She sat there listening, her frail hands clasped tightly on the table. She did not interrupt, did not ask questions, just looked at me with sad but understanding eyes. I went on, my voice breaking further. "I am tired, Grandma. I have sacrificed everything. Love time, my own dreams to save the company. But now I have no drive left. I feel like I have lived for nothing. Like everything I did was just to be betrayed." I stopped, bowing my head, feeling hot tears welling in my eyes. I did not want to cry. Did not want to seem weak in front of her, but I could not hold it back anymore. The pain, disappointment, and helplessness of the past 3 months crashed over me like a wave. I covered my face, trying to hide the tears, but my shoulders shook with each sob. She stood quietly and came to my side. I felt her bony hand rest on my shoulder, gentle but firm. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft as a lullaby, "you have not lived for nothing. You are being tested to understand your true worth." I looked up into her eyes. Despite the weariness of age, they shone with fierce conviction. "Grandma," I whispered, "I do not know what worth I have left. I have lost everything. The company, my position, my trust in Dad." She took my hand, her cold yet strangely warm fingers enveloping mine. "You have not lost everything," she said firmly. "You still have yourself, Ethan. And that is the most important thing. The company, the titles, they are temporary. But you carry the spirit of your grandfather, of this family that you can never lose." Her words pierced the darkness in my heart like a ray of light. I gripped her hand, feeling the faint warmth of her frail fingers. "But what do I do, Grandma?" I asked, my voice desperate. "I cannot just watch them destroy Grandpa's legacy." She smiled, a sad but meaningful smile. "You do not need to save the company, Ethan. You need to save yourself. Find your own path and do not let those who are not worthy define your value." We sat there in the small kitchen talking late into the night. She told me stories of the early days when she and Grandpa built Carter & Coney, of the hardships they overcame. Your grandfather used to say she recounted that a good vine needs not just good soil, but someone who loves it. You are that person, Ethan. Not Logan, not your father, but you. As the clock neared midnight, I saw she was tired. I helped her to her room, fetching her heart medication from the bedside cabinet. Her hands trembled as she took it, and a vague fear crept into my heart. She was so frail, and the thought of losing her sent a shiver through me. I sat by her bedside, watching as she lay down, her silver hair fanning across the pillow like a halo. Before I left, she took my hand again. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice faint. "If one day I am gone, keep walking your path. Do not look back at the past. Promise me." I knotted my throat too tight to speak. I hugged her, feeling the warmth of her fragile body, the faint scent of wine like a living memory. It was the smell of simpler days when I believed I could do anything. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I promise, Grandma." When I stepped out of the house, the night was deep. I lingered by the car, watching the golden light from the window fade. Her words echoed in my mind like a premonition that tightened my chest. I knew she was preparing me for something, but I did not want to think about it. Not now. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove away, carrying her warmth and my promise. Not for the company, not for my father, but for myself and for her. The months that followed were a suffocating blur. My new office, a cramped corner on a lower floor of Carter & Co.'s headquarters, became an invisible prison. The atmosphere in the company was taut as a bowstring. Every meeting and hallway was filled with averted glances and hushed whispers. Revenue plummeted. Major partners began pulling out, and the remaining veteran employees left quietly. I watched the company, my grandfather's legacy, crumble day by day, powerless to stop it. I tried writing reports, sending emails, speaking directly to Logan, but it was like pouring water on a duck's back. He did not need my advice. He wanted me gone. Then, on my 37th birthday, a day I had hoped would pass quietly, everything collapsed. I was summoned to the executive boardroom, the room where I once led grand strategies, now Logan's domain. When I walked in, he was seated at the head of the table, a small silver-wrapped gift box beside him, a smug smile stretching across his face. The other directors sat in silence, their eyes avoiding mine as if they knew what was coming. My stomach churned, a foreboding tightness gripping my chest. "Ethan, have a seat," Logan said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "It is a special day, is it not? Your birthday." He pushed the gift box toward me, his eyes glinting with cruel amusement. A little something from the company. I stared at the box, but did not touch it. "What do you want, Logan?" I asked, my voice cold, masking the trembling within. He laughed a laugh that made me want to punch him. "Relax, Ethan. Just a small change." He paused, glancing around the room to ensure all eyes were on him, then continued. "The board met, and we have decided the strategic advisor role is no longer suitable. You have done well, Ethan, but we need a newer team. So effective today your contract is terminated." The room seemed to hold its breath. I felt the blood in my veins turn to ice as if time itself had stopped. Fired. The word echoed in my mind, sharp and merciless. I looked at Logan at his smug grin, and I understood. This was not a business decision. It was a meticulously planned act of revenge. He wanted to erase me, not just from the company, but from the Carter family legacy. I said nothing. I could not. I stood, pushed the gift box back toward him, and walked out. The sound of my shoes on the wooden floor rang out each step like a hammer blow to my pride. I heard whispers behind me, but no one dared call me back. I walked through the hallway, past the paintings depicting Carter and Co.'s history, and into my office for the last time. I did not take much, just a file folder, and the old watch my grandfather Henry Carter had given me. The only thing still tying me to those bygone days. As I left the building, the glow of the Carter and Company logo bathed my face, a bitter farewell. That evening, I drove to my father's house, the sprawling estate on the outskirts of Sonoma Valley, where he lived with Claudia. I did not know what I expected: an explanation, a defense, or just a shred of comfort from the father I once idolized. When I entered the living room, he was seated in an armchair, a glass of wine in hand. Claudia stood beside him, her eyes as cold as ever. "Ethan," he said evenly, "you are late. We are about to head out for dinner." I did not mince words. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling with restraint, "Logan just fired me. He has kicked me out of the company, out of the family legacy. Did you know about this?" He looked at me, but his eyes were empty, as if I were a stranger. "Ethan, you need to respect Logan's decisions. He is the CEO. He has the right to do what is best for the company." It felt like a slap in the face. "Best for the company," I nearly shouted. "He is destroying everything. Revenue is collapsing. Employees are leaving. Partners are pulling out. Do you not see I spent 12 years saving this company, and now you are telling me to respect him?" Claudia cut in, her voice smooth but sharp. "Ethan, you are being too emotional. Logan is doing what is necessary to modernize the company. You should accept it and move on." I looked at my father, waiting for him to say something, anything, to show he still saw me as his son. But he just shrugged and said, "Listen to your mother, Ethan. Do not make things complicated. Your mother." Those words were the final knife. I turned and left the house without looking back. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel, tears streaming down my face. But I did not wipe them away. I let them fall, let the pain sink in, let it remind me that my own family had betrayed me. A few days later, still reeling from the shock, a phone call stopped my heart. It was Mary, my grandmother Margaret's neighbor. "Ethan," her voice trembled over the line. "Your grandmother, she passed away in her sleep this morning." I do not remember what I said, only that I hung up, got in the car, and drove like a madman to the small wooden house on the outskirts of Sonoma Valley. Rain poured down, pounding the windshield, mingling with the tears I could no longer hold back. When I arrived, an ambulance was parked in the yard, its red lights flashing through the rain. I ran inside, pushing open the door, and found the doctor and nurse in the living room, their faces heavy with regret. "She went peacefully," the doctor said, but his words were just an echo in my head. I knelt beside her bed, where she lay, eyes closed, her face serene as if sleeping. I took her hand, cold and still, and felt my world collapse. Margaret, the only person who believed in me, who gave me hope in my darkest days, was gone forever. I held her, whispering, "I am sorry, Grandma. I am sorry I did not visit more." I called my father, my voice breaking. "Grandma is gone," I said. He was silent for a moment, then replied, "Handle the funeral arrangements, Ethan. Claudia and I will come later. No comfort, no emotion." I hung up, feeling erased from this family. The funeral took place 4 days later, simple as she had lived. Only a few close neighbors attended, people who had tasted her homemade wine, who had heard her stories of the old days. My father and Claudia arrived late, dressed in elegant black, their eyes cold and perfunctory. They stood, offered brief condolences, and left early. I stood by her grave, staring at the headstone engraved with Margaret Carter, feeling like I had lost the last piece of my family. A few days later, I met with the family lawyer, hoping she had left a will, some trace I could cling to. But he shook his head, his voice sympathetic. "No formal will, Ethan. By law, Margaret's estate, the vineyard, the house goes to your father, Richard Carter." I was stunned, as if the ground had caved beneath me. The vineyard where my grandparents planted the first vines, the heart of Carter and Kodai's soul, now belonged to my father, a man who no longer understood its value. I stood before that vineyard, rain soaking my clothes. I had lost my job, my grandmother, and now the family's memories. I felt like a ghost erased from the Carter lineage. No company, no family, no place to stand. I stood there in the rain clutching my grandfather's watch and wondered, what do I have left? The months that followed were the darkest of my life. I left central Sonoma Valley and moved to a small apartment on the outskirts, a place with 4 bare walls and a creaky old bed. It had no windows overlooking the valley, no scent of ripe grapes or the vibrant light of Sonoma Valley. It was a place to exist, not to live. I cut off contact with my father, Claudia, and Logan. My phone sat silent, no longer buzzing with calls from colleagues or partners. I had once been Ethan Carter, Chief Operating Officer of Carter & Company, but now I was just a name no one remembered. Despite my MBA and 12 years of experience, finding a new job proved harder than I had imagined. The wine companies in Sonoma Valley knew me, but they also knew about the Carter family drama. Some expressed pity, others steered clear, wary of the trouble I might bring. I took on small consulting gigs, market analysis for local wineries, but the pay was meager, barely enough to cover rent and food. Some days I had to sell personal items, a watch and old suit just to get by. Each time I opened my wallet, I felt my self-respect erode bit by bit. But what hurt most was not the financial struggle. It was the sense of losing myself. Every day I drove past my grandmother's old vineyard, now owned by my father. I would pull over by the roadside, staring through the fence at the vine standing resiliently just as she had lived. I remembered her words, "Do not look back at the past." But the past was all I had. I clutched my grandfather's watch, the last relic of those bygone days, and wondered if I had the strength to go on. My 37th birthday arrived quietly. I woke in the silent apartment, dim light filtering through thin curtains. No cake, no well wishes, not even a decent cup of coffee. I planned to repeat the usual routine, sitting at my laptop, searching for new projects, trying not to dwell on what I had lost. But a knock at the door shattered the stillness. I opened it to find a courier holding a white envelope with my name, Ethan Carter, written in elegant handwriting. I opened the envelope, my heart pounding as I read the contents. It was an invitation from the office of Edward Collins, the lawyer who had handled my grandmother Margaret's personal affairs. Per the instructions of Mrs. Margaret Carter, the letter read, "We are authorized to contact you on your 37th birthday. Please visit our office at 10 a.m. today." I stood there clutching the envelope, a mix of confusion and hope swirling within me. My grandmother. What had she left for me? I did not dare hope too much, afraid it would turn to disappointment. But I grabbed my coat, took my car keys, and drove to the lawyer's office, my heart hammering in my chest. Edward Collins' office was in central Sonoma Valley, a small but elegant building with large windows overlooking the street. When I walked in, Mr. Collins, a man in his 62s with silver hair and gold-rimmed glasses, stood to greet me. "Ethan," he said warmly, "you are right on time. Please sit." I sat, my hands trembling on my lap. He pulled a sealed envelope and a thick file from his drawer, placing them before me. "Your grandmother prepared these years ago," he said, his eyes meaningful. "She called it her contingency plan if things went off course. She knew you would need this, Ethan." My throat tightened as I looked at the envelope. I broke the seal and pulled out a legal document, my heart nearly stopping as I read the words. It was a trust fund in my name, valued at $6 million to be activated on my 37th birthday. $6 million. The figure stunned me, but what made me tremble was the handwritten letter attached in Margaret's familiar slanted script. The same writing I had seen on childhood birthday cards. I held the letter, took a deep breath, and began to read. "My dearest Ethan, if you are reading this, things have not gone as you hoped. I know you have sacrificed so much, given your youth to protect the family legacy. But my boy, the true legacy is not in the company or in money. It is in you, in your heart and spirit. I created this trust not for you to seek revenge or reclaim what is lost, but to build a new path, your own path. Trust in yourself as I have always trusted in you. Do not let the past cage you. Live, Ethan, and live well. Love, Grandma Margaret. Tears spilled onto the paper, blurring the ink. I bowed my head, shoulders shaking, unable to hold back. She had known. She had foreseen it all. My father's betrayal, Logan's hostility, my downfall, and with her wisdom and unconditional love, she had given me a chance to start anew. I clutched the letter, feeling as if she were here holding my hand, telling me I still had worth, still had hope. Mr. Collins sat quietly, giving me time with my emotions. Finally, he spoke. Margaret was an extraordinary woman, Ethan. She always said you were the family's hope. This was her way of ensuring you would not be left behind. I nodded, managing only a thank you. I left the office, carrying the envelope and letter, a spark igniting within me. For the first time in months, I felt I could breathe, could dream, could live again. That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where my grandmother rested. Her grave lay beneath a large oak, her headstone glinting in the sunlight. I knelt, placing the letter on the stone, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma, for believing in me, for giving me this chance. I promise I will not let you down." I stood gazing at the sky, a new energy coursing through me. The $6 million was not just money. It was trust. Love Margaret's true legacy. I would use it to rebuild, not for revenge, but to prove I was Ethan Carter. And I would never give up. I began with a new dream. Carter Vine Works, an organic winery focused on sustainable farming and exceptional quality. I leased an old production facility on the outskirts of Sonoma Valley, a modest, weathered place with peeling brick walls and a rusted tin roof. It was not glamorous like Carter and Co.'s headquarters. But I did not need glamour. I needed a place to start over. I called a few old friends, veteran employees who had worked with me at Carter & Company, and left because they could not stomach Logan's management style. They came not for the money, but for their faith in me. Ethan Mark, the former production manager, said as he stepped into the facility, "If you can do this, we will follow you to the end." I combined new technology with the traditional winemaking methods my grandfather, Henry Carter, had taught me. I wanted every bottle of Carter Vine Works to carry the soul of those first vines, the love my grandparents had poured into this land. My goal was not just to compete with Carter & Co., but to restore the true meaning of the Carter name, a legacy of quality, integrity, and dedication. But reality was harsher than I had imagined. Starting from scratch was a battle. I had to secure production permits, find suppliers, and build a distribution network, all with a brand name the market had never heard of. Even with the $6 million, I quickly learned that money could not buy trust. Major suppliers in Sonoma Valley were tied to Carter & Co., and they hesitated to work with me. "Ethan, you know how it is," an old supplier said, his eyes apologetic but resolute. "We do not want trouble with Logan." I did not blame them. Logan, with the power and wealth of Carter & Coney, was a force not easily challenged. Meanwhile, Logan began to notice my presence. Under his leadership, Carter & Coney continued its downward spiral, and the emergence of Carter Vine Works was like a thorn in his side. I heard rumors that Logan was using his influence to block my path. One morning, I got a call from a small distributor who had agreed to work with me. "Ethan," he said, his voice tense, "I am sorry, but I have to back out. Carter & Coney threatened to cut our contract if I dealt with you." I gripped the phone, feeling a surge of anger, but it was only the beginning. Logan did not stop at unofficial threats. He spread rumors that I was using old Carter & Company recipes and data, accusing me of trademark infringement. Tabloid articles began to surface calling me the family traitor or the jealous older brother. Worse, I received notices from tax authorities and product regulators demanding inspections of Carter Vine Works licenses and production processes. The audits dragged on for weeks, halting production, delaying orders, and piling on financial pressure. I knew without proof that Logan was behind it all. This was not just competition. It was a personal war. Some nights I slept at the facility on an old chair, too exhausted to go home, working to fulfill the few orders we had left. I was drained, my eyes sunk in my hands, trembling as I inspected each bottle. Financial strain forced me to sell a portion of Carter Vine Works shares to a small investor, a move that felt like losing a piece of my dream. My small team, Mark, Sarah, and a few others, was my greatest source of strength. They stayed not for the paycheck, but because they believed in me. Ethan Sarah said one day as we inspected a new batch of wine, "You are the real leader, not Logan, not anyone else. You." Her words were like medicine, giving me the will to keep going despite my weary legs. After nearly 6 months of perseverance, a small ray of light broke through the storm. A local restaurant chain agreed to distribute Carter Vine Works wine. They tasted Margaret Reserve, the organic wine I named in honor of my grandmother, and they loved it. For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely, my heart a little lighter. This small success caught the attention of the local media. An article in the Sonoma Valley Register called me the betrayed man rising from the ashes. My story, from fired COO to an entrepreneur chasing an organic wine dream, spread, and Margaret Reserve became a symbol of quality and resilience. But this success also ignited Logan's fury. He launched a news smear campaign, hiring bloggers and small publications to claim I was riding the Carter brand for fame. One article even called me a recipe thief, suggesting I had stolen trade secrets from Carter & Co. I read those words, my blood boiling, but I held back. Many urged me to sue Logan or speak out publicly to defend my honor. "You cannot let them slander you like this," Mark said, his voice thick with anger. But I shook my head. "Our actions will speak for us," I replied. "If I sue, it will only prolong the drama. I want them to see Carter Vine Works stand tall, not because of words, but because of quality." I focused on every detail, overseeing each bottle, each vine, ensuring every Carter Vine Works product was perfect. I believed that kindness and dedication would outlast Logan's lies. And deep down, I knew one thing. The more fiercely he attacked, the more it proved I was on the right path. Every slander, every audit, every canceled order only fueled my resolve. I was not fighting to bring him down. I was fighting to prove that I, Ethan Carter, was more than just a name in the family. I was the bearer of my grandparents' true legacy. Nearly 2 years have passed since I received my grandmother Margaret's trust fund, and every day has been a battle. Carter Vine Works. The small company I built from the ashes has begun to take root. Our organic wines, especially Margaret Reserve, have been warmly embraced by local restaurants and true wine enthusiasts. But my victory is not just in the numbers on revenue reports. It is the affirmation that I was not defeated, that I could rise again even when the world turned its back on me. Meanwhile, Carter & Co., the company that was once my pride, is sinking into crisis under Logan's leadership. The contrast between the two companies could not be starker. On one side is Carter & Co., with its glamorous offices and expensive advertising campaigns, but riddled with financial chaos and impulsive decisions. On the other is Carter Vine Works. Small, modest, but resilient, honest, and steadily growing. Every bottle we produce is a declaration. Quality and dedication will always triumph over vanity. I have heard rumors about Carter & Co. through the press and old friends. Revenue has plummeted. Major partners have pulled out, and employees continue to leave. Logan's high-risk real estate ventures have failed, leaving behind massive debts. He tried to mask it with lavish advertising campaigns, but the truth cannot be hidden forever. One morning, I opened the Sonoma Valley Register and saw a bold headline: Crisis at Carter and Comey Family Legacy on the Brink of Collapse. The article detailed Logan's mismanagement, his extravagant spending on cars, yachts, and unnecessary parties. I read it, but I did not feel vindicated. Instead, a deep sadness settled in. This was once my company, my grandparents, my family's. Now it is just an empty shell. My father, Ethan Carter, finally realized his mistake. I started receiving messages from him, short, pleading texts. "Ethan, we need to talk. Son, meet with me." But I did not respond. I could not. Every time I saw his name on my phone screen, I remembered his indifferent gaze when I was fired. When I questioned him about Logan, I sent one reply. "You know what led the company to this point?" Then I turned off my phone, unwilling to hear his excuses. Ethan began facing pressure from investors and the media. The Carter family's reputation plummeted. Claudia, as usual, tried to pin the blame on me. She appeared on a local talk show, her sharp smile and dramatic tone in full display, claiming I had betrayed the family by starting Carter Vine Works to compete with Carter and Company. Ethan was always jealous of his brother, she said, her eyes gleaming like an actress on stage. But the public was not fooled. The evidence from financial reports to former employees' testimonies pointed to Logan's incompetence. Claudia could manipulate my father, but she could not manipulate all of Sonoma Valley. I stayed silent. The press repeatedly reached out wanting to interview me about the Carter family feud, but I declined every offer. I did not want to turn my story into a cheap drama. Instead, I focused on Carter Vine Works. On the quality of our products, I launched a new wine line, Henry's Legacy, in honor of my grandfather. Each bottle was a perfect blend of tradition and innovation. My grandfather's handcrafted methods combined with modern technology. When the first bottles of Henry's Legacy hit the market, they sparked a sensation. Restaurants, hotels, and even some international distributors took notice. An article in Wine Spectator called Henry's Legacy, a symbol of tradition and innovation coexisting. I read it, my heart pounding, not with pride but with the knowledge that my grandfather somewhere was smiling. Carter Vine Works' success was not just a personal victory. It was a declaration that I, Ethan Carter, was the true Carter, as the press began to call me. International investors reached out proposing partnerships to export our wine to Europe and Asia. I received calls from Italy, France, Japan, places I had once dreamed of bringing the Carter name to when I was at Carter & Co. Each new contract, each compliment from a client was a brick in the foundation of my new legacy. But I remained humble, never mentioning Logan or my father in conversations. I wanted my actions to speak, not my words. Meanwhile, Carter & Company entered an inevitable collapse. An independent audit was conducted and the truth was shocking. Logan had manipulated finances, falsified profit reports, and used company funds for personal expenses. He had spent millions on cars, lavish vacations, and even a Miami condo no one knew about. Shareholders were furious, demanding his removal as CEO. An emergency meeting was held and Logan was replaced by an interim director, an outsider hired to salvage what remained. I heard the news through an old friend, but I did not feel joy. Instead, I felt regret for the company, for the legacy, and for Logan, who had dug his own grave. Many of Carter & Co.'s former clients began turning to Carter Vine Works. They called saying they wanted to work with someone who truly understands wine. Each new contract was an indirect but powerful counterstrike against Logan. I did not need to speak out or sue. The market chose me. Not because I was Logan's brother, but because I offered quality sincerity and a trustworthy story. One evening, as I was inspecting a new batch of wine at the facility, my phone buzzed. It was Logan. I stared at his name on the screen, my finger hovering over the decline button. He called again and again, leaving long, pleading voicemails. "Ethan, brother,
We need to talk. I know I messed up. Help me." I listened but did not reply. Not because I was gloating, but because I had nothing left to say. Logan had his chance and he chose his path. Now I wanted to focus on mine. But deep down I knew the war was not over. Logan may have fallen, but my father Ethan Carter was still there, and he would not let go easily. I looked out the window, the moonlight illuminating the vineyards, and told myself, "Come what may. Dad, I am ready." That fateful afternoon arrived on a day of gentle sunlight when golden rays streamed through the windows of Carter Vine Works headquarters. I was inspecting a new batch of wine when Sarah, my assistant, knocked on the door. "Ethan," she said, her voice tinged with tension. "You have visitors. It is your father and Logan." The meeting room door opened and they walked in. My father, Ethan Carter, still carried the polished demeanor of a corporate chairman, but I noticed the weariness in his eyes. His silver hair was more disheveled than usual, and his shoulders slumped slightly as if the weight of his mistakes pressed down on him. Beside him was Logan, his face-pale eyes fixed on the floor, devoid of the smugness he wore the day he fired me. They stood there in the modest meeting room of Carter Vine Works, a far cry from the luxurious leather chairs and crystal chandeliers of Carter & Co. Here there was only an old wooden table, a few chairs, and a photo of my grandparents on the wall, a reminder of the true legacy. "Ethan," my father began, his voice trembling, lacking its former authority. "Thank you for agreeing to meet us." I nodded, saying nothing, my gaze cold but composed. I pulled out a chair, gesturing for them to sit. The air was thick with tension, each passing second, heavy with the promise of a storm about to break. Logan sat silently, hands clasped tightly in his lap, unable to meet my eyes. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure, but I saw the desperation in his expression. "Ethan," he continued, "Carter & Comey is in trouble. The shareholders have removed Logan from the company. It is on the brink of bankruptcy. We need you. We need you to save the family legacy." I stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the Sonoma Valley vineyards. "Dad," I said, my voice even but icy, "you chose Logan. You said he was the future of Carter & Co. Now you are here asking me to save the company you let him destroy. How do you think I feel?" My father bowed his head, his hands trembling on the table. "Ethan, I was wrong," he said, his voice nearly a whisper. "I let Claudia manipulate me, let emotions cloud my judgment. But you are my son. You are the only one who can save the company." "I will save it," I said firmly, making them both look up at me. "But not for you, and not for you, Logan. I will do it for Grandpa, for Grandma, for what they built. But I have conditions." My father frowned, his eyes wary. "What conditions?" he asked. I stepped back to the table, placing my hands on the wood, looking straight into his eyes. "I will merge Carter & Company into Carter Group Holdings, creating a unified corporation. I will take full control of operations, restructure the company, and save it from bankruptcy. In return, you transfer all your shares to me. All of them." The room fell into a deafening silence. My father's jaw dropped, his face paling as if he had been slapped. "Ethan," he stammered. This is the family's company." "Family," I shot back, my voice like ice. "The family that fired me turned its back on me. Let Logan destroy Grandpa's legacy. I am not doing this for revenge, Dad. I am doing it to restore what this family was meant to stand for. Not hollow prestige, but real value." Logan shot up, his face flushed with anger. "You are exploiting this to take everything," he shouted, pointing at me. "You have no right. Carter & Company belongs to the whole family, not just you." He started to say more, but my father raised a hand to stop him. He looked at me, then at Logan, and I saw the struggle in his eyes. Finally he sighed as if all strength had left him.
All right, Ethan, he said, his voice. I will sign. The signing took place in heavy silence. Mr. Collins, my lawyer brought the share transfer documents. My father took the pen, his hand trembling, and signed his name. Logan sat there, head bowed, silent. I stood tall, watching him sign, but there was no joy in me, only a strange emptiness. After the signing, I stood and spoke, my voice resonating in the room. As of today, I announced the formation of Carter Group Holdings, a new corporation combining my grandparents' traditional legacy with modern vision. I looked at my father, then at Logan. Logan, you will be removed from the board. Dad, you will hold an honorary advisory role, but with no authority. This is your chance to make amends. In silence, my father nodded, his eyes misty with tears, but he said nothing. Logan stood and stormed out, slamming the door without looking back. I heard the sound, but felt nothing but relief. Claudia, as usual, was absent. After the meeting, she sent a letter proposing reconciliation, but I did not open it. I had no need for her hollow words. The sunset cast a radiant golden glow over the Sonoma Valley vineyards, streaming through the windows of Carter Group Holdings' office. I sat down, placing the photo of my grandparents on the desk, and gazed at my grandmother, Margaret's smile. She was the only one who believed in me when the world turned its back. When my father chose Logan, when Claudia manipulated everything, when I was fired and lost it all. Her letter, with its slanted handwriting, still lay in my desk drawer, a small flame guiding me through the darkest days. Live, Ethan, and live well, she had written. And now, as Carter Group Holdings emerged from the merger of Carter & Company and Carter Vineworks, I knew I was honoring her words. But this journey was not just about rebuilding a company. It was about rediscovering myself, about learning what family forgiveness and true success really mean. True success, I realized, does not come from defeating others. I did not need to bring down Logan or shame my father to feel accomplished. Success was standing in the winery, watching barrels of Margaret Reserve being packed, hearing the laughter of my small but loyal team. Success was a call from a San Francisco restaurant saying their customers loved the story behind my wine. Success was an email from a distributor in Tuscany proposing to bring Noah's legacy to Italy, where my mother Lillian ran her small cafe. Success was staying true to the right values, even when everything around me crumbled. Carter Group Holdings to me was not just a business triumph. It was a triumph of dignity. When I announced the formation of the new corporation in the modest meeting room of Carter Vineworks, I was not just merging two companies. I was merging two parts of myself. Ethan of the past, who sacrificed everything for Carter & Co., and Ethan of the present, who learned to rise from the ashes. Every bottle bearing the Carter Group Holdings name was a reminder that I had overcome the darkest days, that I had not let the past define me. The past, with my father's broken promises, with Logan's betrayal, was part of me, but it was not all of me. How I stood up, how I rebuilt that, is what defined who I am. I remembered my mother's words. Do not expect recognition from others. Ethan, do what is right, and time will prove you. She was right. I did not need my father's proud gaze, Logan's apology, or Claudia's admission of fault. I had proven my worth through the wines, the contracts, the people who believed in me. Sarah, Mark, the small team at Carter Vineworks. They were my true family, not because of blood, but because they understood and respected what I stood for. I held the photo of my grandparents, gently tracing Margaret's face. Thank you, Grandma, I whispered, my voice breaking. Thank you for believing in me. She had foreseen it all. The betrayal, the collapse, and my resurgence. The $5 million trust was not just money. It was her faith, her message that I could do it, even when no one else believed. And I had not let her down. Carter Group Holdings was not just my company. It was my grandparents' legacy built on integrity, resilience, and love. I stepped out of the office, locked the door, and drove home. The familiar road wound through the vineyards, the scent of earth and ripe grapes drifting through the open window. I thought of my mother, her small cafe in Florence, Italy, and promised myself I would visit her soon. I thought of my grandparents, the first vines they planted their love for this land. And I thought of myself, Ethan Carter, who had lost everything, but found so much more. Under Sonoma's star-filled sky, I knew I had lived as Margaret urged to live and live well, not to prove anything to anyone, but to prove it to myself. And that I knew was the greatest victory of